Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Saurabh and panel. That was a fantastic conversation. Really enjoyed that. Now on for our first of our Digi-side chats, and I'm delighted to welcome a fantastic gentleman, Anand Birje from HCL, who also is now probably winning the award for the nicest wall art behind him. Good morning to you, Anand. Great to have you on here. Maybe it'd be good to hear a bit about yourself and your background, and did you intend to be a services leader as you went through your career? Maybe you could share a little bit about yourself.
Sure, Phil, thanks. And first of all, congratulations on the first day of the symposium. I enjoyed the previous panel conversation and your session. And thanks for the compliment on the background. It's not my design choice, but I'll take it. So Phil, you know, and we've talked several times before, I currently our digital business globally, which actually is a combination of everything we do in digital consulting, from process and design consulting, and then the delivery and execution of digital, which happens through our application services and data analytics services lines of businesses across all industries across the world. It's a large part of HCL, and actually, as you know, based on our Mode 1, 2, 3 strategy, one of the fastest growing areas of HCL's business in the market. I've been at HCL now 18 years, Phil, part of the leadership team based here in San Francisco Bay Area. And I've had different roles over a period of time. We've seen amazing evolution in the last 5 years, particularly you've tracked us very closely as we transformed ourselves inside out and became a market leader, transforming the Mode 1 to 3 strategy and executing to it pretty well, becoming more and more relevant and disruptive in the market space. Prior to that, I was part of our corporate development team, actually working on our strategy as we ran up to the Mode 1 to 3 sort of strategic, thinking. And prior to which I was actually part of our founding team for the infra business. So I've seen different facets of HCL and different parts of our growth. And it's exciting. It's exciting to see all of that journey converge today with the digital conversations.
Terrific. And who would you say have been your major influences along the way, Anand?
Just too many. I mean, it's difficult. In fact, even as I was thinking through the last session and some of the points that were made, just something that comes straight to mind right now. If I combine what's very, very relevant to us today, Satya Nadella at Microsoft comes to mind. I mean, there are many others, and I don't want to say that's the only one, but think about the world today and what we're all struggling with, right? Empathetic leadership, we talked about that. Servant leaders, really CEOs who have proven that empathetic leadership can transform organizations. Authenticity in leadership and authenticity in organizations. It's so important to know who you are, extend your core strengths, and then, of course, bring strengths on board that you don't possess. But having that authenticity in everything you do, understanding of your products and markets, and hence prioritization of your business priorities in a world that's constantly changing. And finally, sort of the whole emphasis on curious organization building, which is so important because the inflection of change is so large and it's here to stay. And so how do we build curious teams and curious organizations? I think Satya has taught that and actually led from the front on that. We follow that a lot in HCL. The whole Mode 1 to 3 strategy was about, on the same principles, building collaborative teams, building authentic teams, and really building curious teams that are constantly evolving.
And, HCL's kind of really sprung into a strong market position in the last, I'd say, 4 or 5 years, quite aggressively. But you're a little different from the traditional India heritage service providers. Why is that? What do you think is different about HCL compared to some of the other competitors that you have?
Yeah, I think the difference comes from the journeys and where we've come from in many aspects, right? We started as a product engineering and product design firm. Unlike a lot of the traditional IT services firms who started catering to enterprise IT and helping enterprise IT in either support, build, or transformation of applications and infrastructure. We got there later. And that sort of initiation of journey became kind of a core DNA for us. when you're an engineering partner to some of the most innovative brands in the world, here in Silicon Valley, where I'm based, and across the world, what it does teach you is some of what is becoming super relevant to enterprises today, right? Building continuous journeys, being part of aggressively transformative journey maps that product companies are constantly imbibing on, being agile at the core, being disruptive at the core. What worked last 5 years may not be relevant next 5 years. And some of those sort of core DNA elements have transponded to every other aspect of our business. As you know, 15 years ago, we kind of looked at the large infrastructure services marketscape and found there was a big opportunity to disrupt it in the way it was done versus where the market was going. And we saw that as an underserved space, and we really disrupted the infrastructure services business, became a formidable leader in that space. We saw that something similar happening 5 years ago in the application services marketscape, in digital services marketscape. We saw there was an opportunity to really bring design, consulting, and ideation closer to continuous engineering and continuous delivery, what we call scale agile delivery, because enterprises were trying to adopt IT operating model, which was more similar to product companies, where they're able to innovate faster, iteratively bring business and technology teams closer and collaborate. All that we've learned, from our initial days is becoming super relevant. So I think the ability to disrupt ourselves, the ability to constantly look what's ahead in the market, not taking complacency in our current leadership and current strengths, but being able to pivot fast and then execute relentlessly with customer as the core focus, are some of the things that are just sort of imbibed in our culture, and that makes us different, I guess.
Okay. So, I mean, you guys have such a strong heritage in the infrastructure space. So I'd love to ask you a bit about this migration to the cloud, because we've seen from the Pulse study of 800 of the Global 2000, they're all doing it, but only 72% really have a strategy around it. So what should a cloud strategy look like? What should clients really do to address this?
Yeah, you said it, Phil. Cloud was happening for the last 6 years, right? Progressive enterprises were adopting it. Progressive enterprises have already set themselves on journey. And what's changed in the last 12 months is now that's proliferating across the enterprise, across industries, across the world. So the adoption acceleration, for a variety of reasons, to increase resilience in business, to be able to have speed to market on digital strategies, to execute faster on the changes that businesses are demanding, and of course, to take advantage of new technologies faster, sooner. All of that is leading to faster adoption, discussions on cloud adoption, even across regulated industries that were really pushing back on cloud adoption is happening. I would say three things, right? Number one, defining cloud as a journey, similar to digital journeys. And in fact, maybe even adjacent to digital journeys, right? Cloud is not in itself, a journey. It's an enabler of a broader enterprise digital journey. So defining what's the North Star of the digital journey and how do you take advantage of cloud in that journey is number one. What that means, secondly, is your enterprise business architecture is going to transform itself. And it's not just an infrastructure modernization that you're doing, but you're looking at your business processes. You're going to need to look at where are you going to consume from the cloud and where are you going to compose on the cloud. And what I mean by that is there will be areas of your business that don't differentiate you necessarily, but are core and critical to business operations. And you want to consume more from the cloud. But there are areas where you're going to differentiate and need to be nimble, need to be flexible so you can be agile and change as needs happen. And that's where you need flexibility and composability. And so business architecture decision-making is going to be very critical in what you consume from which cloud providers and at what pace. I think these two factors, and the third, not to undermine the organizational culture change, the operating models are going to change, right? We still have very siloed organizations. We have application services teams, infra design teams, business teams, sometimes a missing business architecture function at all. I think those are going to converge over a period of time. We're going to see these teams need to come closer together, work closer on business architecture, work closer on that digital roadmap, which will define the cloud consumption patterns. And then, of course, the complexities in execution. Enterprises undermine the execution complexity. It's not a lift and shift anymore, right? Enterprises who want to really leverage the strength of cloud are looking at how do they think cloud native at the app layer, at the integration layer, at the data layer, at the infrastructure layer. That's where your journey to cloud is going to be successful. So I think it's an orchestration of all those three things: prioritization of digital roadmaps. Second is business architecture thinking, and then defining your cloud, transformation journey or adoption journey.
Excellent. And, one of the things we've really seen in the pandemic year plus is the role of the CIO or the CTO seems to have really shifted. We had a roundtable of CTOs recently, and they said with everything going into the cloud, it's really shifted their focus from one of maybe technology context to much more business context, and then how do you scale it, how do you secure it? How are you seeing the role of the CIO shifting in the conversations you've been having in the last year from pre-pandemic days? Could you sort of share a little bit about how it's changing?
Yeah, and as you saw, even pre-pandemic, some of this role change was happening a little bit more gradually in the previous 4 or 5 years. And there was this acceleration button that hit, post-pandemic. I think 2, 3 things. One is CIOs were incredibly getting closer to business functions. I think we heard this in the previous panel. Business collaboration closer to the CIO and the IT function, which really defines agile, ways of working, was already becoming important. And CIOs, I've started to see retooling their own organizations to align more by value chains. Traditionally we saw CIOs organizations were aligned either by horizontal technologies or by silos such as project organization versus support organization, or applications organization versus infrastructure and data organization. So we've seen the evolution of an operating model change in the CIO organization, led by this need to be closer to business. And so hence value chain alignment of IT operating model. So depending on your business, your finance teams, your supply chain, your manufacturing and execution scheduling, your distribution and logistics, your sales and marketing. Again, as I said, depending on industries, what are the critical value chains in your organization? And CIOs are organizing themselves by that, allowing themselves hence to be closer to business and build closer tie between the ability to deliver features faster, but also to understand business priorities and get business participation in their execution and transformation agenda. So we're seeing the CIO role getting really more and more closer to business. We're seeing increased collaboration between line functions, CMO, COO, CFO, and CIO. We saw the evolution of CDO as a function. In fact, I see 2 types of CDOs, the Chief Data Officer. Increasingly, we're seeing data as a function or value chain being recognized across progressive enterprises, and the Chief Digital Officer. And sometimes all of those 3 could be consumed into the CIO role too.
Right. And then as a partner to the CIO, as you look around you and you see the influence of Amazon, Microsoft, Google into the industry in general, how does that impact the role of like a service partner like HCL? Does that drive you closer to the client and more of an orchestrator for them? Or do you find clients are picking and choosing their points of contact and who they want to deal with?
Actually, you hit it, right? It's a huge amount of orchestration, decision-making, prioritization, business architecture point of view that clients are seeking from partners like us. Just imagine this, just at the applications layer, probably 10 partners were important to enterprises 10 years ago or even 5 years ago across their value chains, and most of those 10 partners consume the entire market. Today, that's more like 70, 80 partners, from SaaS providers to niche industry product providers to the hyperscalers that you referred to. And that's true at every layer, from applications to data to integration, to robotics, to IoT, to infrastructure. And so as service providers, CIOs are increasingly, given our breadth and sort of exposure to the markets, and also our stronger ties and relationships with each of the technology ecosystem providers, because we build our capabilities based on ecosystems. CIOs and enterprises are seeking us to be kind of the orchestrators, as well as being their sort of sounding boards as they define their business architecture strategy, their digital strategy, their cloud strategy, because ultimately we might be participating in the execution of that. And we are also the only neutral sort of entity in between that has the wide exposure of the ecosystem. So we are not typically, aligned to one ecosystem partner's agenda. And so bringing that neutrality in the decision making is something CIOs seek from us.
Right. Okay. And how does this impact your strategy with your own talent and people you're bringing in, both senior and junior? Are you approaching it very differently now with the changing requirements of the client end?
It's hugely different, as you rightly said. It's all about how do we build constantly curious organizations and constant learning across the organization, not just in juniors and teams that are new, but teams that have been there for a while, who probably have got resilient in their ways, and they need to be disrupting themselves and being open to change and learning. So I think learning has become a massive part of our business strategy and I would say execution strategy, and the constant learning of that. We actually follow a principle called Dreyfus, which means we don't measure team versus ability to collaborate. And that's really becoming cornerstone in how we build empathetic, collaborative, yet curious teams that are willing to learn constantly, adapt constantly, and collaborate constantly. So those are things that are driving our talent strategy.
And have you found remote working for technical staff versus collective working in office? Is it much harder to innovate when you're not together? What's your real gut feel on this one?
The good news, the bad news is the whole industry is going through this, right? Not just us, our customers, everybody's remote. And when a shock happens to everybody, there is kind of an alter ego that comes in. And somebody said it on the previous panel. It's been amazing how everyone has adopted. Our challenge was we assumed that the engineers and the teams will actually adopt faster. The question was, will the senior management adopt? Will the leadership adopt faster? And actually, even teams like design teams who necessarily want to be collaborative, physically, they want to ideate, and do stickies on the wall. And they've been able to adopt and change their ways of collaboration. We actually follow this principle called design to DevOps. And the entire design to DevOps strategy was adopted into virtual agile methodology. And I think the adoption has been phenomenal. And the acceptance of that change has been phenomenal.
Wow. What do you think the impact is going to be on the offshore delivery versus nearshore, onshore as we, keep gravitating back to this hybrid reality? Do you think we're going to get a different split?
The whole virtual world did, the virtual adoption did fill in the last 1 year, is the lines got blurred. Remember, a couple of years ago, we were talking about distributed agile being necessarily in the same time zone, in the same geography, perhaps in the same city, so that people can be physically present. That sort of, went off the grid in discussions. And so I think the lines are blurring between offshore, on-site, and those kind of discussions. Teams are increasingly virtual. I think it's all about, where do we find the right capability and talent? Given the acceleration of digital across enterprises and across markets, there is a massive, talent war going on in the industry. There's a massive, need to build, nurture, and constantly innovate on talent at scale, because enterprises are investing at scale. And so I think, we are really looking at all locations, not just offshore, nearshore. We are actually looking at location expansions of our current delivery locations, and, new talent pools, adoption, a lot more fresher talent coming in, people graduating from schools here in the US, in Europe, India, and other locations, who are actually also fast adapters of new technologies and new learnings.
And is there like a fresh energy as people are getting back into the workplace and starting to look forward? Are you sensing an exuberance, or are we still dealing with a year of burnout?
I think, you're right. I mean, I think the burnout happened in very early days, right? And I think there's an acceptance that has set in. People have become innovative and efficient in the ways they're leveraging tools. In fact, productivity has gone up, not just in our industry, but across industries, including our clients' industries. People have been able to prioritize and manage time better. Some of the time that was sometimes spent in traveling to offices or traveling to client locations traveling between cities and across the world has gone down, and that's made them more efficient. So, we're amazed at how people have adapted, and there is an exuberance of the fact that technology adoption and digital acceleration is really creating new conversations and new business. I mean, the growth across our industry is phenomenal. Industries that were not adaptive, that were not so progressive, large B2B regulated industries are also now in the same conversations. And so we are seeing a lot more wide spectrum energy of the solutions and of the opportunities we are seeing in the market, Phil.
Terrific. And that is the end of our time, unfortunately, but it's been a fantastic hearing from you, Anand, Birje at HCL. I really enjoyed the conversation and your thoughts around cloud and tech and the change in skills. So thank you very much for your time, and look forward to hopefully seeing you in person pretty soon.
Thanks, Phil. Look forward to that, and nice to see so many friends on the tiles here. So hello, everyone, and listening to your next session. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.